Hey guys, Marzinkin here, bringing another Dragon Ball Z Dokkan battle video. And so earlier today we did get the data download on both versions of the game. That has given us a bit of insight into the start of the hero celebration, the EZA'S that we're going to be getting, and there's a little bit of I say confusion, because some of this stuff was misunderstood right at the beginning after the live stream when they mentioned certain dates, but it's still very strange to me. The hero celebration officially starts tomorrow. So at the time this video goes up, it'll be 2 o'clock in the afternoon UK time. It starts at 5 AM like the next day. So sort of like basically 15 hours after the video goes up. That's when well, I guess technically it starts at midnight the night before with the reset. So actually when this video goes up, the celebration technically starts in like 10 hours. Because at midnight at reset, we're going to get the free-to-play unit and a bunch of the missions. But then we get the EZA'S 5 hours later. But the interesting thing is we get the EZA'S for this year, the 8 summonable units and the free-to-play Toa from last year. But we don't get any of the new units and the new banner. Those will most likely not be coming out until the 10th or 11th, which is when the current sales for Lord Slug are scheduled to end. So it is very strange to me. I think I mentioned this in the video the other day, but like, I'm not really sure why, because the Bojack EZA comes out at the same time as these guys. So we're technically still in the Slug celebration. We're getting the main EZA for his celebration, which is STR Bojack. But then they're also starting the Heroes celebration earlier than every previous year. But they're not bringing out the new units until next week. So why are they not just starting the whole thing next week? I'm not sure. Very confusing. But we are getting the EZA'S. I mean, at the end of the day, I guess I'd rather have them sooner so we can start messing around with them. Although it is weird to think that we're going to get the 8 main Heroes EZA'S, 9 if you include Toa, but not actually have the new units to run the teams with. So we'll still be running like the Limit Breaker Vegeta team, I guess. So that'll be interesting. I mean, Limit Breaker Vegeta, I mentioned this to someone on Twitter like yesterday, but funny thing is Limit Breaker Vegeta is still actually pretty good and still kind of usable in the meta. The problem is that with the current build of the Heroes team, he's by far the best unit on the team and he can't really carry the team all by himself anymore. So if the EZA'S and the new units are good, Limit Breaker Vegeta could probably still be on the best version of the Heroes team once all of the 2024 units are actually in the game. But I guess we'll have to wait and see. So one thing we obviously now know because of the data download is the details for all the EZA characters. We did get the Trunks and Pan ones shown on that stream, and there were rough translations of them that I mentioned in the video that I put out breaking down the information we got from that stream. I keep saying stream, it was just a premiere, but it's a lot easier to say stream. Everybody knows. It wasn't technically live, but there was a chat and everything, so it's close enough. So we're going to go over the EZA'S, and some of you guys may have seen them by now, but I'm going to go over them and give my thoughts on them and how good I think they could be. So Trunks, we saw, has a leader skill upgrade to 4 key and 180. I mean, the fact that we have 200% leaders and the new units will be 200% leaders, his leader skill probably not that useful outside of maybe like Battlefield or something. But his passive, key 1, attack and defense 50% per heroes or time travelers ally on the team, depending which category has more members. So they added a category, but it's time travelers. I really wish it had been like Vegeta Family or Realm of Gods or something, because you could make much more. You could put him on some interesting and different varied teams, whereas time travelers does limit him a little bit, because most of the heroes units are time travelers anyway. So you're going to be running him with a lot of the same units, but he gets an additional attack and defense 100% and a great chance to crit when performing a super. So he doesn't need any crit in the hidden potential. He has 5 crit already because he's a tech unit, and then he has 70% chance to crit when supering. So no crit needed in his hidden potential. He gets an additional 50% defense when performing a super attack and changes key spheres of a certain type to rainbow if all allies in the turn are heroes or time travelers. So extra defense on super, obviously very good. And then he launches 2 additional attacks, each of which has a high chance of becoming a super if all allies are heroes or time travelers. Now, the problem with this is kind of like the first part of his passive, where he's getting a buff per member on the team depending on which one has more. So if you have like a time travelers team that then has like a couple of heroes units that aren't time travelers, or you have, depending on the leader skill, a heroes lead with a couple of heroes units and then some units who aren't heroes or time travelers. Obviously that means he's getting less stats on the first part of his passive, but it means the last part here with the 2 additional attacks, he won't get that at all if it's not all the allies are on one category. So he kind of still is locked to one team, really, which is a bit unfortunate. But I mean, I've said before, right, if units are stuck on one team, as long as they're really good on that team, I don't think it's too bad. I've seen some calcs for this guy, like he can put out, especially because with these additional attacks, he can do 4 supers in one turn if you count the hidden potential as well. So I've seen calcs for him doing like 18, 19 into 20 million attack, which is good, with a 70% chance to crit. The only thing is he doesn't have any defensive tech. He can get up to pretty decent numbers of raw defense, but with no guard or damage reduction or anything like that, he's going to take big damage from big boss super attacks. But you know, he's a damage dealer, orb changer. Like, he's not really supposed to be a tank. He should tank most normals relatively well, but he seems pretty decent. And then Pan is the other one that we saw before. Attack and defense 140, additional 70% when performing a super. Crossover allies 3 key and 40%, and then an additional 20% for heroes. So 3 key, 60% for heroes characters, really good. Great chance to crit, which is funny because she's not a damage dealing unit. So the fact that she has built-in crit is just kind of funny. Great chance to dodge, so 70%. Additional defense 70% within the same turn with each attack evaded. And then she gets an additional attack and defense 70%, and all allies chance to crit 15% per crossover ally, self-excluded, attacking in the same turn. So if she gets a, if there's 2 other crossover allies, like on a full heroes team, all allies are getting a 30% chance to crit, and then she's getting an additional 140% attack and defense. So considering as soon as she dodges the first attack, she then gets another 70%, which I think is, I do believe it is multiplicative. It means that, especially if she's supered already, because she greatly raises on super, like after getting a dodge, her defense should be quite high, and she has 70% chance to dodge already anyway. So she should be able to dodge very frequently. After a dodge or 2, tank normals, because it's each attack she gets 70%. So she dodges like 3 attacks in a row. Her defense is going to be insanely high, which is good. But now we have the new ones that we had no idea on. And Meki Kaibra, this is the one I've been super looking forward to. He was one of my favourite units from this batch. I think he was super underrated. And he does seem quite good from my initial look at this. So he gets key 1 and attack and defense 200%. He gets an additional 100% attack and defense when performing a super. And then he changes orbs other than AGL to rainbow. He gets an additional attack and defense 25% per key sphere obtained. So 25% per orb is a good buff for a nuking unit, especially one that creates rainbow orbs. Then he gets an additional attack and defense 100% with 2 or more AGL orbs obtained. He gets the attack only if it's 2 or more STR or physical, and defense only if it's 2 or more tech or int. He recovers 10% HP and gets 10% damage reduction per rainbow key sphere obtained. So that's really good. And then he launches an additional super with 2 or more rainbow orbs obtained. So with his own rainbow orb changing, hopefully that shouldn't be too difficult to get on a fairly regular basis. So with the minimum of 2 rainbow orbs, not only is he getting a guaranteed additional super, and for his super he greatly raises attack, which is an infinite stack, and greatly raises defense for 1 turn. He also lowers attack and defense. If you get 2 rainbow orbs, he's going to do he's going to have 20% damage reduction, which isn't a crazy amount, but obviously depending on how many orbs in total you get with the coloured ones as well, you're getting 25% per key sphere obtained. So once you've picked up all your orbs and you press like the team button so you can see what his defense is at, he then gets 100% when performing a super. Then he also is getting the defense raise from his super attack effect on top of that. If you got the 2 rainbow orbs, he's getting a guaranteed additional super. And then obviously he can still get the additional from the hidden potential as well. And he is infinitely stacking his attack. So he seems like he could be pretty good. You got to remember with rainbow orb changes, it's difficult to pick up a lot of rainbow orbs sometimes, depending on how it connects the orb field. On average, you're probably going to get 2 or 3 rainbow orbs every turn. So he's not going to be getting like, you know, 50% damage reduction. You can get 5 rainbow orbs, but it's very rare because the orb field has to fall in a very specific way for you to be able to get 5. But you know, you are going to get the occasional turn where you can grab 4. So he's going to have 40% damage reduction on top of everything else. So he has the potential to be really, really good. And of course, he's on the demonic power category. All of these like demon characters, really looking forward to seeing how they were going to be and how good they're going to be on the slug team. So really looking forward to seeing this guy in action, especially like on a turn where you get a decent amount of orbs. he's potentially going to look quite crazy, which is very cool. He's the #1 out of all of the EZA'S, the one that I did not want them to fumble, and he seems pretty good. So then we have the Super Saiyan 3s, like the Gotenks and the Gohanks. Now these guys are a bit lackluster, I think. Attack and defense 150, additional attack 150 when performing a super. I really don't see why that couldn't have been attack and defense. Additional attack and defense 30% with each super performed up to 150. Launch 2 additional super attacks when there's another crossover ally in the same turn or when the target enemy is attack down or defense down. And then guaranteed crit when there's another Super Saiyan 3 ally in the same turn. The super attack is greatly raised attack and defense in 1 turn, supreme damage, and seals. And then Gotenks, obviously these 2 units always been very similar. Gotenks is basically exactly the same. The only difference is he gets the additional 2 super attacks with a crossover ally, or when the enemy is stunned or sealed. Well, actually, this only says when. Yeah, see, this says or when the target enemy is in attack down. I think this should say or when as well, because otherwise it means there has to be a crossover ally and the enemy has to be stunned or sealed, which is really bad. So one of these is correct. Hopefully it's this one, because that would be very bad for them otherwise. So they need to do 5 supers to fully max out their passive. They can get 4 in 1 turn, because the 2 additionals and then obviously the hidden potential. The crit when there's a Super Saiyan 3 ally on the same turn is kind of weird, because like these 2 obviously designed to go together, but neither of them are going to be slot 1 units. So one of the things that we have speculated and kind of wondered about is, because he is technically a crossover unit, could Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta get his Super EZA in this celebration? Which would then kind of make this part of their passive make sense, right? Because then you could have that Super Saiyan 3 Vegeta in slot 1 and then one of these guys in slot 2. But I'm not really sure. But other than that, they are basically exactly the same. This guy seals, this guy lowers attack and defense. That's why they have the opposite effect in their passive for the additionals. This guy gets it if they're sealed, which Gohanks does. And he gets it if they're in attack or defense down, which Gotenks does. So, I mean, they seem okay. But because they don't get the defense on super, they're only going to have, at most, when they're fully maxed out, 300% attack and defense start of turn. Which seems like a high number, but it's really not going to be that much. And then they greatly raise on super. They are going to get multiple super attacks. But I would be surprised if maybe they can get up to 1 million defense raw on the turn where they actually get like 4 supers. But that means they're only going to be tanking most normals in the game, but not all. And not any of the like big boss super attacks, which is a little bit disappointing. So then we have the Xeno, Goku, and Vegeta. These guys are the ones, other than Meki Kaibra, super looking forward to seeing what these guys were going to do, because they have potential to be really good options for a bunch of different teams, right? Because Goku obviously supports Goku family, but, you know, teams like Kamehameha, Super Saiyans, like those teams have a lot of Goku family characters, so he could be useful on those team builds, even if the whole team isn't Goku family. Like, he can still be very useful for some of those units, especially you think about, like, the new family Kamehameha Gohan, him getting the support from this guy. So, attack and defense 150. He gets 50% damage reduction and a guaranteed additional super for 1 turn. So, on his first turn, 50% damage reduction and a guaranteed additional. Obviously, good for a stacking unit. Additional attack and defense 150 when there's another Goku family or Heroes category ally on the team. Very easy restriction to get, of course. Goku family allies 3 key and attack and defense 50%. So 50%, very solid buff. Additional attack 77% when performing a super, and launches an additional attack that has a high chance to become a super if there is another Heroes ally attacking in the same turn, or an extreme class enemy. So again, this means if you're using him on the Heroes team, he's going to get that extra attack and an additional with a high chance to become a super. If you're using him on something like the Kamehameha team and maybe you don't have any other Heroes units, as long as you're fighting an extreme class enemy, he's still going to get this extra part of his passive. So that means with the best RNG, on turn 1, obviously he could get 4 super attacks, and then every other turn after that he could do 3. And he's greatly raising his attack and defense, which is an infinite stack. And he also does have a 70% chance to stun, which can be quite useful. So he seems solid. Having the 50% damage reduction on turn 1 is really nice. It's kind of like what they did for Tech Gohan, because it's like he's a stacking unit, but turn 1 is where he's obviously going to be the weakest. So he gets a 50% damage reduction and the guaranteed extra super. So he gets a guaranteed extra stack. So that's really good. And then Vegeta is the same, but in the typical Vegeta and Goku unit curse, where the Vegeta unit is always worse, instead of 50% damage reduction, he gets guard for 1 turn. And I mean, guard is good, but it's not 50% damage reduction, right? So he gets guard and an additional super for 1 turn. And then basically his whole passive is the same, except like it says Vegeta family where it would say Goku family, right? So other than that, he's the same. Oh, and instead of having a 70% chance to stun, he greatly lowers attack. So for some events, that's obviously useful. There are a few events where you can lower attack that you can't stun. So that could be quite useful. He definitely, like this guy and the Goku, they definitely seem like they could be pretty solid. Like any stackers though, it's going to be one of those things where if you are floating them, because they are support units, they're not going to be getting as many stacks as they would if they're on main rotation. And if you get bad RNG, like after the first turn, you get that guaranteed additional. But the secondary part of their passive, it only has a 50% chance to become a super. You might not get the hidden potential. So if you get like a few turns in and they haven't really done many additional supers, then they are going to be in danger against some of the toughest bosses. Because again, like some of these other units we've talked about so far, they don't really have any defensive tech. They're just going to be raw defense, which they are only getting from their super attack effect stacks. So in certain situations could be very good. Other situations they could definitely get caught, but they're going to give a lot of support to their team. I really want to see this guy on the Tech Saiyan Day Vegeta team. I think that's going to be very interesting, with a lot of support for Tech Vegeta, the Super Saiyan Blue Evolution Vegeta, obviously King Vegeta, like that rotation. Imagine Tech Vegeta with King Vegeta and this guy on the rotation. Like every unit on that turn is going to be looking pretty good. So looking forward to that one. And then last but not least, for the summonable EZA'S, this is the one I was the most worried about because his kit was so basic pre-EZA. So Vegex, who is of course the fusion of Vegeta and Trunks, attack and defense 150%. Additional attack and defense 150% when performing a super. So he gets defense on super. So why didn't they give that to the Super Saiyan 3s? Additional attack 30% up to 150 and chance of performing a crit 20% with each super attack performed. Okay, so he only gets attack with each attack performed, whereas I guess Gotenks and Gohanks get attack and defense. So when they're fully maxed out, they're all getting the same amount. But defense on super is better than defense building up in your passive, I believe, right? Because it's more applicative with support and everything. He doesn't have a cap on the crit chance, though, notice as well. So once he's done 5 supers, he just gets guaranteed crits, which is cool. Key 2 and an additional attack that has a high chance to become a super when there's another crossover or Super Saiyan's ally in the same turn. So that's interesting. Could be useful on the Super Saiyan team. And then all attacks become crits and launches an additional super when the target enemy is attack down, defense down, stunned, or sealed. So, I mean, that's pretty good. Like, in events where you can do status effects, like a lot of the new Pepigal stages and stuff, this guy with a crossover or Super Saiyan's ally is then going to be getting 3 supers in 1 turn. Well, 2 guaranteed and 1 with a high chance. And then the hidden potential. So he could be supering 4 times in 1 turn. He's going to be critting pretty consistently after his first appearance. He greatly raises defense, which is an infinite stack, and raises attack for 1 turn with supreme damage. So, I mean, again, just like the Xeno Super Saiyans, as long as he gets a good, like, first maybe 2 turns, his defense could be looking pretty decent, but he doesn't have any other defensive tech. Like, I do wish they'd given these guys, this guy, the Super Saiyan 3s, and the Xeno Super Saiyans, if they'd given them some kind of dodge chance or damage reduction, even if they had to build it up by attacking or something, because again, like, they could be good later on if they've supered enough against normals, but big boss super attacks are going to be bad news for, like, most of these units that we've looked at, outside of, like, Mechi Kaibra with really high stats plus a bit of damage reduction, and Pan having the really high chance to dodge, but if she doesn't dodge, she's going to get caught out by those big supers. So, I mean, they seem decent. I definitely don't look at any of them and go like, okay, yeah, they're bad. Because even this guy, like, if you get good RNG on the first turn, good RNG on the second turn, and he will see, obviously, when we do the showcases, what kind of numbers he can get up to. And then ideally you don't want him to get caught by supers, but the thing is the Xeno Super Saiyans are supports, whereas this guy isn't. So if you're putting him on a team, like say a Super Saiyans team, think of all the top tier characters you could have on a Super Saiyans team. If you put this guy on there, he's not supporting the team, he's just doing some fairly decent damage probably, and then having relatively decent defense. So if you have access to, I know not everyone is going to, of course, but if you have access to every unit in the game, there's probably a whole bunch of units you would put onto like a Super Saiyan's team before this guy. But not to say that he's not going to be decent, but I guess we'll have to wait and see. And then, of course, the free-to-play Toa, attack and defense 200%, additional attack and defense 150 when performing a super, which is really good. High chance to dodge as the second or third attacker in the turn, plus additional chance to dodge 5% up to 15 with each attack evaded. So she can end up with 65% dodge chance. All allies attack and defense 30% when there are 3 or more extreme allies on the team. All allies attack and defense 15% for 2 turns after the character evades 3 or more attacks. In battle when there are another 3 or more extreme allies. It's only once only though, so it means you get that 15%. So when she dodges 3 times, you'll then get that buff for the rest of that turn and then the following turn, which is interesting because if she's in slot 3, then obviously no one on that rotation kind of gets the benefit from that, but the next turn does. And then she gets an additional attack and defense 100% when performing a super. All allies key to an attack and defense 20% and changes AGL to STR for orbs when all allies are in the heroes or crossover category. So on a full heroes team, that means she gets 250% attack and defense on super. She's providing all allies with 50% attack and defense, and then once she dodges, it'd be 65% for the next rotation, which is kind of crazy. And she greatly raises attack and defense for 1 turn on her super. So, I mean, she actually seems like she could be pretty good. On the full heroes team, like, she's giving a lot of support and getting tons of, like, stats on super, which I guess is good because she is a free-to-play character. But she actually looks really solid. Funnily enough, she could potentially be better than, like, Vegex, just from, like, my brief initial readings of these, which is kind of funny. Probably better than the Super Saiyan 3s as well, potentially. So yeah, that's good. Good free-to-play EZA for Toa. And then, of course, we do have the info on the actual free-to-play unit, which is the female warrior in black. Her kit's kind of funny, because she obviously appears in Heroes and then becomes, like, Yamcha's girlfriend, right? So, attack and defense 150, additional 100% when performing a super, all allies key to, and 30% attack and defense. Great chance to crit and an additional attack and defense 150% when the character is the only crossover character on the team. So that's interesting, because then she also gets an additional attack and defense 30% with each attack performed up to 120, and launches 2 additional attacks, each of which has a medium chance to become a super when there is another crossover ally on the team. So she's the only one. She gets 70% crit chance and an extra 150% stats. If she's not the only one, she builds up 30% with each attack performed up to 120, so technically lower stats overall, but 2 additional attacks that have medium chances to become supers. So obviously you're going to get extra super attack stacks potentially. She also gets gives attack and defense 86% for the character and allies whose name include Yamcha, and randomly changes key spheres of a certain type, int excluded, to int key spheres at the start of the attacking turn when there's an Earthbred Fighters ally in the same turn. So, especially with the fact that it's creating int orbs, I guess she is int as well. But it's almost like her kit is designed to support int Yamcha, which is pretty funny. It's a shame we didn't get a new, well, I guess the free-to-play one from, like, the Greatest Warrior panels. It's a shame that he's not in, I guess. But this is pretty funny. And she does supreme damage to the enemy and raises attack and defense for 3 turns. So you can get a couple of stacks on that. It lasts until her next appearance if she's on main rotation. So she seems kind of interesting. The funny thing is, like, the only team you could really run, like, her and Yamcha on is if you have STR Roshi. Because obviously, you know, Yamcha's on, like, Turtle School and Earthlings and all that stuff. And she's Peppy Gals. Otherwise, it's going to be very difficult to even run them on a team together anyway, which is kind of strange. But yeah, so there's all the Heroes units from the data download, the free-to-play, and all of the EZAs. Let me know what you guys think of these unit details down below in the comment section. I think, like I say, all of them are pretty decent, but none of them stand out as being like, you know, oh, this is one of the new best EZA TURs. Kaibra certainly has some really good potential, and Toa is really, really good for like a free-to-play EZA. But I guess we'll have to see how they look in the game. They will all be out tomorrow morning. I will be live when the stuff comes out, so we will be getting the EZAs done and start recording the showcases and testing them all out and everything. So hopefully I will see you guys at the stream. So let me know your thoughts on the Heroes EZAs down below in the comments. So that is going to be it for the video, guys. This has been the Masked Ningen. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Check out the links down below, and I will see you all again soon. Have a good one.